We left off at the end of the third stanza on Wednesday. This is Valdiction Forbidding Morning, page 922. We talked about how the old Ptolemaic understanding of the universe. So, Earth at the center, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spheres that surround the Earth. So these are balls that go all the way around. This is what's called the Ptolemaic system, named after a guy named Ptolemy, okay, who postulated there are these 9 spheres. And you'll hear the phrase, or you'll read the phrase sometimes, referring to the music of the spheres, okay? That refers to, each of these spheres is moving. And it was thought, Pythagoras talks about this, it was thought that the movement creates a sound, okay? If we could hear that sound, and Dunn's going to talk about this in one of his poems, if we could hear that sound, we would immediately die and be raptured up to the greatest bliss. It's the most beautiful sound to be imagined, all right? Dante deals with this in The Divine Comedy, all right? So, in that third stanza, Donne compares movement of the earth, earthquakes, okay, with the movement of the spheres, and says this creates all kinds of concern and worry because we wonder, what's causing it, etc. But the movement of the spheres, greater, is innocent. Why? Because after Galileo publishes his findings on the movement of the planets and stuff in 1610, the new let me put it this way, scientific consensus was Earth is not the center of the universe, nor is the sun the center of the universe, but the Earth revolves around the sun, and the sun also moves. And what Galileo was essentially doing there is he was proving Copernicus's ideas from the mid-15th century, okay? So, now we go to stanza 4. Stanza 4 is still referring partially to this idea of the spheres. Dull sublunary lovers love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence, because it doth remove those things which elemented it. So, here's the sphere of the moon, okay? Dull sublunary lovers love. That means, put it this way, here's the Earth, here's the orbit of the moon, everything below the orbit of the moon is sublunary, okay? In this Ptolemaic conception of the world, everything below the orbit of the moon is changeable, mutable, impermanent, or unpermanent, if you want, okay? It's down here, really, that chance is at work, all right? So, dull sublunary lovers love. And you've got a gloss, corruptible, subject to change, etc. Whose soul is sense. So notice the phrase in parentheses. Sublunary lovers love has as its soul sense, sensory perception. Okay, what does he mean by soul? We talked about how, each of these spheres has a ruling intelligence, an angelic being. that governs and guides it. All right? The moon, so to speak, is the physical manifestation of whatever the angelic being that rules this. Or you can think of that ruling intelligence. Go back to Ben Jonson's epitaph on Shakespeare, soul of the age. Here's the age. And Johnson is saying, Shakespeare is the soul, the ruling intelligence, the guiding spirit of the age, all right? So, what is the soul, the guiding spirit of dull sublunary lovers' love? The speaker says it is sense. That is sensory perception. Think of Shakespeare's sonnet 116, which says, love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. So here's the compass, all right? Notice, love's not time's plaything. Here, in this image, time is the soul, and Shakespeare is saying, no, image doesn't really work. So, back to Donne. Dull sublunary lover's love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence. So, if the soul of one's love is sensory perception, what happens when the thing one's senses perceive leaves? Olivia, you got a little grin on your face.
It doesn't have, it can't live out its purpose.
Yeah, there's nothing to perceive, right? If you have A and B, and A only knows B through sensory perception, and B goes out the door, then A's left what? Alone. There's nothing connecting. Why? Because there's no, use Shakespeare again, marriage of true minds. Minds are not sensory. Okay? So, dull sublunary lovers' love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence. They cannot admit, they cannot allow to be separated. Why? I'll tell you why. Because that's done saying that, because it doth remove, what's the it refer to? Absence. Absence doth remove those things which what? Which elemented, which composed that love. What are the things which compose the love? Think of what a blazon does. It's a catalog of beauties. It's a catalog of the beautiful things about the beloved. The face, the eyes, the hair, the nose, the mouth, the breast, the legs, whatever, okay? From a male perspective. Straight male, let me put it that way. So, that's dull, not intellectually bright. Not necessarily what it means. Dull does mean, though, not bright, not shining, okay? But we, notice the but, turn, but we, by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is. Our love is what? It's not bound to the region of the moon and below. Our love is refined. You got to go from here much, much, much higher. Okay? There's a book written called The Ladder of Love. And there was a passage in the Book of the Courtier by an Italian named Baldassare Castiglione, which was translated into English in the mid-16th century. And in it, It's all about this idea that love leads to love, and you go higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. Okay? So, we, by a love so much refined that ourselves, what's the ourselves? Our souls, who we really are, know not what it is. We don't know what our love is. We enter assured of the mind. This is a marriage of true minds. This is a love of two minds, true minds. Enter assured. Enter means what? Like interstate commerce, interstate travel. Between. They are between assured of the mind. It's like his assurance comes from her mind and her assurance comes from his mind. We care less eyes, lips, and hands to miss. It doesn't matter if you are physically here or not. Why? Because my assurance is in your mind, in your spirit, in your soul. It's not in your physical bodily presence. This is the antidote to, if you can't love the one you love the one you're with. Because if the one you love is not physically present, according to that song, well, then love whoever is present. This is the opposite of that. You can love the one you love. It's just not physical. So, he says, we are so much refined. And we saw that language of refinement in the previous poem, the canonization. Refined by love, the speaker talks about. So now look at the next stanza. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, again, same language as we saw in the canonization. Though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion. Our two souls, one soul, together they make one soul. He says, they don't suffer a breach because I have to go. No. The image he uses is of what? A stretching. An expansion, like gold to airy thinness beat. Why does he use gold? Why not lead? Lead is a similar metal to gold. What do I mean? They're both malleable. They're not brittle metals. Okay? You can pound gold. You can literally pound gold to be thin enough to see light through it. You can pound lead thin enough to see light through it. Gold, however, is rare. Lead is common. Okay? So he says, our two souls are like gold. Our two souls, which are one, are like gold. And when I have to leave, they're like gold to thin, to airy thinness. We will stretch. So then you kind of get this impression that maybe the person listening doesn't agree. And he says, okay, if they're two, that is, if our two souls aren't one, but are two separate souls, they are two so as stiff twin compasses are two. What do they mean, twin compasses? He's talking about the legs. Think of this as a drawing compass. So you've got one leg with a pin, a point on it. So you can stick that in the paper, and the other one has a piece of lead or ink in it. Okay? When they're closed, they're like this. They're both upright. They're the same distance all the way down. They're true to each other, right? So he says, thy soul, the fixed foot, the point, makes no show to move, but doth if the other do, right? So this one, the fixed foot, notice, stays upright. It doesn't move at all. But it does if this one moves. Because how does the compass work? You move this part out, but if you try to draw a circle like that on a piece of paper, what's going to happen? It's not touching the paper. This one does what? It reclines. It leans after it. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth, if the other do. And though it in the center sit, I always think about bringing a compass, and I never do. I've been doing this all 30 years. So, it leans after it and does what? If it stays fixed, I'm not going to do it. It does what? It makes the circle, we're told, though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam. So whether this one leans just a little bit, it makes a small circle, or leans, a huge amount, it makes a very big circle. What does this foot always do? It leans and hearkens after it. Hearkens, like it calls out. The farther away this one goes, more and more and more, this one leans towards it. And grows erect as that other comes home. So like this, to go all the way out. And though it in the center sit, grows erect as that comes home, such wilt thou be to me. You, whoever the auditor, the person hearing this is, he says, you will be what? My fixed foot. You will be my anchor. Right? Who must, like the other foot, obliquely run. I, like the other foot in the compass, I have to do what? I have to run obliquely to you. What's oblique mean? At an angle. I've got to leave. And as long as you stay here and hearken after me, you will make my circle, my journey, just, that is, true. You will draw me back to you. Thy firmness makes my circle just and makes me end where I begun. Where did he begun? Right here. Let, as virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, so let us melt. You stay here. I'll go. I'll be back. But the implication is, I'll only be back what? If you stay. What happens? Two people get lost in a wood. You see this all the time in popular culture, films and TV shows and stuff. They get lost in the woods, and they both decide to leave from where they are to go off and seek help. But they go off together. What almost always happens? What do they end up doing? They walk around in circles. They don't find anything, right? Why? They have no anchor. They have nothing that centers them to where they should be. It's Shakespeare's line, she, or the beloved, is what? That's the reference point. That's the star to the wandering bark. As long as I know you are there, I can always find my way back. Okay? Look at the ecstasy. We're probably not going to do the sonnets. Well, I don't think we're going to do any of the sonnets. Because I was looking for a handout that I had. I have a handout that has all of Donne's sonnets or I used to have one, has all of Donne's sonnets and has the three different arrangements of the sonnets as they existed in the early 17th century. That's my dissertation, was an edition of the sonnets. So he has 19 sonnets, and only one manuscript has all 19. A bunch of others have 16, and a bunch of others only have 12, because at some point he rewrites them. But I don't know that we're going to do any of them, just because of time. So let's look at the ecstasy. Let me erase all of this. Do I need to leave that? Yeah, I'll leave that for right now. All this stuff. What is an ecstasy? Not a date rape drug. It is an out-of-body experience. It's when the soul leaves the body. That is an ecstatic experience. Okay? So, where, like a pillow on a bed, notice it immediately begins with a simile. Like a pillow on a bed, a pregnant bank swelled up to rest the violet's reclining head, sat we two, one another's best. Okay? So what's the simile? What's being compared? A bank by a brook, okay? Pregnant-like. That is, it's kind of puffed up. Not literally pregnant, obviously. So we're told to rest the violet's reclining head. He's describing like, there's a little violet plant and the flower's blooming on its little stalk and it's just kind of leaning against the ground. But the ground has kind of been built up so that it doesn't fall all the way over. Sat we two one another's best. So the bank is like the best thing for the violet. If you know anything about violets, they're, you hear the phrase, a shrinking violet or a wilting violet. Why? They are very frail flowers. They have very, very thin stalks that the flowers grow on. It doesn't take much to knock one over. So it's like the bank is the best thing for the flower. They complement each other. Sat we two one another's best. So one of them is kind of gently reclining on the other. Our hands were firmly cemented with a fast balm, which thence did spring. A fast balm. Or go back to the previous line, cemented. What does cemented mean? Louder? Stuck. Okay. Glued. We don't usually use the word cement today to refer to sticking something to something else. We refer to cement as the noun cement. It's the stuff that is stuck. Sand and rock and mortar and things like that. Water. Okay. But Dunn's using it here like glued. Our hands were firmly glued, stuck together with a fast ball. Fast means firm, cannot be broken. What's the balm? What happens if you hold somebody's hand for too long? Surely you've done this. If you haven't, go find somebody and hold their hand for a while. They start to sweat. Okay? That's the balm, but it's cemented them. Which thence did spring. Notice it sprang from their hands. Our eye beams twisted, and did thread our eyes upon one double string. Why are their eye beams twisting? First of all, what must they be doing for their eye beams to be twisting? Look deep into my eyes. That's what they're doing. They're looking deep into each other's eyes, and they're those light beams that their eyes shoot out by which they see, medieval notion, do what? They twist. Why don't they, why doesn't his eye over here and her eye over here, shoot a beam, and they're parallel, like true love, Instead, we're told they're twisted. I think I've used the phrase before. This is essentially eye sex. It's intercourse of the eyes. They're mixing. All right? We're going to have other images of intercourse later, especially when we get down to the end of the poem. Eye beams twisted, and did thread our eyes upon, notice, one double string. So we have 1, 2, and according to Hegelian dialectics, so you have thesis, antithesis, and what is formed of these? The synthesis. The two are made into one. Okay? So, our eye beams twisted and did thread our eyes upon one double string. So to engraft our hands, as yet was all our means to make us one. See, looking deep into the other's eyes doesn't make us one. But our hands are engrafted. That implies it's not this kind of holding hands, it's this kind of holding hands. The fingers are locked. Okay? Notice, they're engrafted. When you graft a branch onto a tree, you got a branch that's growing off like this, you cut a notch in it. And then you bring another branch in, and you cut a point on that, and you jam that in, and you tape it together, and this new thing grows off this old thing. So to engraft our hands was yet all our means to make us one. Hadn't had sex. And pictures in our eyes to get was all our propagation. That is, the only thing I begot in you was the image of myself in your eyes. The only thing you begot in me was the image of yourself in my eyes. So, what's being implied? Is this the beginning of a relationship? Don't know. But we do know they haven't consummated this relationship. So we get another simile. As twixt two equal armies, fate suspends uncertain victory. What are the two armies? You, me. Okay? As twixt two equal armies, notice they're equal. It's not one has more power than the other. Fate suspends uncertain victory. Uncertain, you can't know which one's going to win. Our souls, which to advance their state were gone out, hung twixt her and me. Our souls went out. That's the ecstasy. His soul has left his body. Her soul has left her body. And they went out for what purpose? They went out to advance their state. What does that mean? This is the language of diplomacy. It's the language of international relations. What does a diplomat, what does an ambassador do when he or she is assigned to a country? What is that ambassador's purpose in that foreign country? It's to look out for the cares and concerns of the state he or she represents. It's to advance the interests of their country. Okay? So their souls go out, and his soul's doing what? He's looking out for his soul's interests. Her soul is going out and looking for her soul's interest. And they hung. They're hanging up there between the two of them. And whilst our souls negotiate there, well, I'm willing to give, and I'm willing to take, and I'm willing to give, and I'm willing to take. So they're bartering for each soul's interests. We, like sepulchral statues, lay. Sepulchral, like at a tomb or a mausoleum. Go to the cemetery down on Highland, and there are some statues there, not a lot. But how do sepulchral statues lay? Really, you need to go more like to an English cathedral, where you have these tombs and effigies of the people lying on top stone statues, like Dunn's own effigy. How do they lay? Like statues, they don't move, right? They're dead. They're not alive. So the souls are out there doing their business, talking, but the bodies are like dead. What's a body without a soul? A corpse. Okay? They're like corpses. All day, the same our postures were, and we said nothing all the day. So, I think that applies, at the very minimum, for several hours. They sit there, holding hands, looking deep into each other's eyes, and don't say a word. If any, so by love refined, that he soul's language understood, and by good love were grown all mind, within convenient distance stood, he, though he knew not which soul spake, because both meant both spake the same, might thence a new concoction take, and part far purer than he came. Notice, in all the previous lines, Donne usually finishes a sentence, that is, we get the period, within 3 or 4 printed lines. This time, we go from line 21 to line 28. It's a long passage that just keeps building. So, back up. If any what? So by love refined. What's another word for refined? Or refine? What do you do when you refine something? Purify it. So if someone who's been purified by love, purified how much? So that he soul's language understood. Well, how do you understand soul's language? Language is what? Except for American Sign Language. It's spoken. Language is speech. But this is speech of the soul. That is, it's not language to be heard by the ears. But if you've been refined by love, if you've been so purified, if you've been raised from this sphere, the sphere of the earth below the moon, and you go all the way out here to the Empyrean where God dwells, that is, if you've been so refined that you can perceive the spiritual, and by good love were grown all mind, we're to become all intellect. What's the difference between, kind of popularly understood, what's the difference between human beings and angelic beings? Whether good angelic beings or demonic angelic beings. Immortal? Okay? They're not technically immortal because angelic immortal, if by immortal you mean not dying, yes. If by immortal you mean eternal, not true, because angelic beings have a beginning. Okay? What else though? Do they have bodies? No, they're immaterial. Angelic beings are, according to most versions of traditional Christianity, they are pure mind, pure intellect. Okay? We aren't, right? We've got minds, we've got intellect, but then we also have this stuff. Yoda tells Luke on the planet where he goes to learn training from from Yoda. He says, we are not this crude material stuff. We are celestial beings. All right? Intellect in the crude material stuff. That's an expression of a Gnostic and or what's called Manichaean perspective. That is, that the body, flesh, matter is evil. Okay? So, and if you were grown all to mind by love, that is, if you became angelic-like, I think I had it in here, I did the great chain of being, and up here you've got the angelic order, and down here you have the beasts or animals, and humanity is in the middle. And sometimes when we act better, we appeal to our better angels, and when we act worse, we become bestial. All right? This is talking about if you've improved. And by good love we're grown all mind, within convenient distance stood. So if somebody whose love has been so refined and has grown all mind, not literally become a disembodied spirit, but has become intellectually totally aware, could perceive spiritual stuff. And if that person was standing nearby, okay, he, though he knew not which soul spake, because both spake the same, he, the person who had grown all mind, would hear this conversation, but he wouldn't be able to say, his soul said, and her soul said. Why? Because both meant, both spake the same. How can that be? If his soul has gone out of his body to argue his state, to advance his state, and her soul went out of her body to advance her state, how can they both speak, both mean the same? Well, the person who overhears this conversation, we're told, might thence a new concoction take. A concoction is where you take something over here and something over here, and you mix them together, and what do? You create something new. It's this idea. Okay? In part far purer than he came. That is, even if this person had grown all mind, and he came and he listened to this conversation, he would leave even purer than he was when he came. So what is the speaker saying about their love? This is the greatest love there is. This is the purest love there is. This is what he would essentially kind of hear. This ecstasy doth unperplex, we said. Okay, each one of them is saying this. This ecstasy doth unperplex and tell us what we love. I love that couplet. This ecstasy, her soul going out of her body, his soul going out of his body, they both say, this ecstasy, our souls leaving our body, it unperplexes us. Why? Because it tells us what we love. One of the most difficult questions to answer when asked by one's lover. Why do you love me? See, this ecstasy unperplexes them because that is a perplexing question. If a woman asks a man, why do you love me? What's the definite wrong answer? Your body. No. It's always going to be the deal killer, okay? What is the right answer? Go back to the wife of Bath's tale. What is it women want? And men go, whatever you want. Just whatever. This speaker is saying, now they know why they love each other. We see by this, what's the by this? By this ecstasy. By our souls going out of our bodies. We see by this, it wasn't sex. And sex there means both generic sex. It had nothing to do with male and female. The speaker is also saying, it wasn't sex. It wasn't because I want to sleep with you. Okay? We see, and notice the verb switch here. We saw not what did move. We, in this ecstasy, see now that we didn't know what attracted me to you or me to you. What's implied there? I thought it was sex. I thought it was because you're hot or you're handsome. I thought it was because I was sexually attracted to you. We see now. We didn't see anything before. Okay? But as all several souls contain mixture of things, they know not what. That's that old Renaissance notion, medieval, ancient notion actually, goes way back, that everything that exists is contained of a mixture of elements. Okay? Elements might be air, earth, fire, water. They might be atoms, but it's contained of a mixture. All right? And the souls aren't aware of what the mixture is. Love. These mixed souls. These souls. Love. These mixed souls, notice, doth mix again. Love mixes these souls. That is, it takes from him and it takes from her and adds them together. It kind of goes back to the idea of that person who is so refined by love, he leaves taking a pure concoction. He leaves purer than he came. So, love these mixed souls doth mix again, and makes both one, each this and that. It makes her soul his, it makes his soul hers, and it makes out of the two of them a new one. And we add that again. Oh, stay 3 lives in 1 flea spare. It's the same notion. Only here, Dunn's using what kind of language? Beautiful, flowery, platonic, spiritual, love language. Whereas the other one, it's just about crass sex. Sleep with me, and you're not going to lose any honor. Okay? But here, love these mixed souls doth mix again and makes both one, each this and that, and we go back to the opening image. A single violet transplant. The strength, the color, and the size, all which before was poor and scant, redoubles still and multiplies. You can take a violet plant, you can cut it in two, got to get some of the roots, separate it, And the two pieces are now smaller than the one was together. But what happens? You take the one separating the two, you separate that again, and it doesn't double, it grows exponentially, just like you can do with irises and daylilies and such. Okay? The strength, the color, and the size, all which before was poor, can't redouble still and multiplies. So that's an image. When love with one another so interinimates. Think of that word. When love, kind of from up here, does what? With one another so interinimates two souls. Souls are up here. When love does this, mixes between them. Two souls. That abler soul, the new soul, does what? Which thence doth flow defects of loneliness controls. If our two loves be one, then they are like gold to thin the air speed. Oh, if they are two, then they're like the stiff twin legs of a compass, done said in a Valdiction forbidding morning. Okay? Which does what? I've got to go away, you will draw me back. Notice, which thence doth flow defects of loneliness controls. How, if your relationship has created this new soul, how, even though one has to temporarily leave, or maybe permanently leave, how can you ever be lonely? We then, what does the then imply? We, therefore, it's like a summation, who are this new soul, right? Because this is she, he, gendered. This, the new thing, the neutral soul that we saw in the Morrow and the canonization, etc. We then, who are this new soul, know of what we are composed. That is, we know what this is composed of. Down here, individually, they don't know what their souls are composed of. Know of what we are composed and made, for the atomies of which we grow, the elements of which we grow, are souls whom no change can invade. The soul is immortal. Okay? Libby's comment earlier. The soul is immortal. It can't change. All right? But oh, alas, so long, so far, our bodies, why do we forbear? And almost every time I teach this poem, kind of, which much fuller class, I'll kind of say, who's saying that? And almost every time, most of the women go, well, that's the guy talking. That's the guy essentially saying, yeah, this is all nice, but let's get back to bed. Or let's go to bed. He's saying, let's have sex. But this is what? Both spake, both meant the same, according to our persona of the poem. But oh, alas, so long, so far, our bodies, why do we forbear? They're ours. Notice, the body belongs to the soul, not the other way around. Okay? They're ours, though they're not we. Right? Why? 1, 2, 1. They can't be We. Lost my place. They're not we. We are the intelligences, they the sphere. Okay? So, there's the sphere, and notice, what's the we or the intelligences? The new soul is the intelligence of this sphere. We owe them thanks because they thus did us, to us, at first convey. Right? The soul is saying, we owe her body thanks. We owe his body thanks. Why? Because his soul and her soul never could have met unless the bodies had met first. How many times have you heard of somebody falling in love with somebody who they've never met? I don't mean never met like in a room, even never met via social media. Somebody who literally does not know the existence of somebody else, and yet they're wildly, madly in love with that person. It's illogical. It cannot happen. Okay? The bodies have got to at least, wow, you hear that voice? I've known people who fall in love with a voice before, and then they meet the person, you know, Shakespeare does it in the sonnets. Because they thus did us to us at first convey. They yielded their forces, that is, the body's faculties, the body's strength, which are what? Sense, to us. They yielded, the bodies yielded their powers, sensory perception, to us. What's the us? The souls. I literally, when I first saw my wife, literally said, not to someone, to myself, I'm going to marry her. First moment I saw her. Took a while, because she had to dump me, and then, I had to, totally ignore her, make her come crawling back to me, kind of a thing. It's a story we tell. But that's what he's talking about. Or that's what the speaker's talking about. We're running out of time. Nor are dross to us but allay. What's dross? It's a refinement term. Because the whole poem's talking about the refined soul, right? Refined love, refined soul. So what do you do when you refine something? Why do you drink maybe distilled water as opposed to water out of a tap? Because it's pure. How is it purified? You remove the dross. You remove the impurities. Gold, when it comes out of the ground, is not pure. Okay? It comes from gold. Or you got to remove the other stuff. He says, the speaker says, our bodies are not dross to us, but alloy. Alloy. What's an alloy?
Like a mix of metals.
You take two metals and you bind them together. Why? Because the metal that you get out of those two is stronger than the individual metals. You read about tungsten alloys, an aluminum alloy, a titanium alloy, a platinum alloy. You've got a majority of one added with something else, and it becomes even better than it was before. The bodies, the souls say, are alloyed to. They make us more. Because again, a body without a soul is what? It's just flesh. On man, heaven's influence works not so, but that it first imprints the air. What the hell is he talking about? Heaven's influence. How does heaven, God, speak to humanity? Assuming for a moment there is a God, and that God does speak to humanity. Use the biblical version. We're getting ready for Some getting ready for Christmas. What's Christmas? The incarnation. How does it begin? Gabriel goes to Mary 9 months before. Gabriel. God sends an angel. Was Gabriel, did she just hear a voice? No, she saw, according to the biblical account. She saw the angel Gabriel. The shepherds see the heavenly host. How does that happen? Do they have physical bodies? No, they do not. Donne reasons that heaven's influence imprints this on the air. That is, it takes a body. It rearranges the crud in the air to kind of show something. And we're out of time. We'll stop there. We'll pick up with, so soul and the soul may flow. So, yeah, we just won't do the sonnets at all. So we'll finish ecstasy on Monday, and then we'll try to do Good Friday 16, 13, and Meditation 17. That's going to be pushy. That's right, because we don't have class on Wednesday. Wait, we've got Monday, and then the fall. Yeah, that's right. Okay, we'll see what we can do. So, okay, that's right. Have a good weekend. Monday's going to be cold, so, dress warm.